You have my promise that you will not stand alone. I'll help defend your rights, 'cause your home is your home. When you grow too weak to go it alone, I'll be there watching to assure you a safe home. When you feel that everything's falling apart, when you're forsaken and it's breaking your heart, just think of me when you feel helpless and alone. I'll defend your rights from your home. Let you home. When you grow too weak to go alone, I'll be there watching to assure you a safe home. Who can you call on when you're frail and need some help? Who will defend your rights when you can't defend yourself? You have my promise that you will not stand alone. I'll help to defend your rights, 'cause your home, it's your home. 'Cause you have rights in your own home. I'll stand with you in your home.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Who can you call on when you're frail and need some help? Who will defend your rights when you can't defend yourself? Who will stand with you? Who'll be your shining light? Who'll be your champion as you struggle for your right? When you grow weary and you're just too tired to fight, I'll stand beside you, protecting your right. You have my promise that you will not stand alone. I'll help defend your rights, 'cause your home is your home. When you grow too weak to go it alone, I'll be there watching to assure you a safe home. When you feel that everything's falling apart, when you're forsaken and it's breaking your heart, just think of me when you feel helpless and alone. I'll defend your rights from your home. Let you home. When you grow too weak to go it alone, I'll be there watching to assure you a safe home. Who can you call on when you're frail and need some help? Who will defend your rights when you can't defend yourself? You have my promise that you will not stand alone. I'll help to send you right to your home. It's your home. Those you have rights in your own home. I'll stand with you in your home.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Amity with NORC. We'll get started here in just a few minutes, so if you'll hang on for a couple more minutes. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's right at 3 o'clock Eastern Time, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is Ombudsman Volunteer Management, Model Materials and Sharing of Best Practices. My name is Amity Overall-Laib, Director of the Ombudsman Resource Center, and I want to share some logistics and housekeeping before we introduce our speakers and get started. The handouts for today's webinar, which includes the slides and a couple of NORC resources, were sent by email yesterday, and they're also available for download in the right-hand side of your screen in the toolbox. We will be sending a follow-up email with some revised final slides, and we'll post those on the website shortly after today's presentation. All lines will be muted during the presentation, so please submit your questions in the toolbox for us to address during the Q&A part of the webinar. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording and all the materials will be posted to the website and shared as soon as possible. Also, a brief evaluation of today's webinar will pop up at the end of the presentation. It's about 5 questions long, really short, and we'd really appreciate your feedback as it helps us shape all of our webinars and training materials. Today, we're very pleased to have Lenè Garrett, Volunteer Recruitment Specialist for the Oregon Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program, and Carol Scott, NORC's Ombudsman Specialist, presenting today. Lenè has held the position of Executive Director for Nonprofit Advocacy Programs in 2 counties here in Oregon. She served on legislative committees, she's participated as a board member and legislative chair for the Oregon CASA Network, and she's also been appointed to the Governor's External Advisory Committee for Child Safety and Substitute Care Independent Review. Lenè is passionate about serving vulnerable populations and is dedicated to working with the Ombudsman team to increase the number of certified Ombudsman volunteers. Prior to working with NORC as our Ombudsman Specialist, Carol was the Missouri State Ombudsman for more than 20 years, and she brings a wealth of Ombudsman experience and knowledge to our team, and we're really glad she's going to be presenting today. With that, I'm going to pass control to Carol so we can get started with today's presentation. Carol?
Thank you, Amity. Glad to be on board and looking forward to today's webinar and the conversations, hopefully, that we'll have through your questions and comments in the toolbox. I want to start off with a couple of polling questions. Katie, would you open the first poll, please? What we want is just a quick yes or no on, do you have a volunteer job description? So this is going to be one of the things we're going to be talking about is the importance of making sure that people know what it is that they're committing themselves to. So we're going to do this pretty quickly. Katie, go ahead and close the poll.
So it looks like, Carol, this is Amity again. Do you have a volunteer job description? 85% of those on the call said yes, and 15% said no.
Okay, that's great. So the second question, Katie, go ahead and open that poll, is do you currently contact the references of prospective volunteers? Again, this goes to the risk management of making sure that people are telling you the truth, and it's sad that we have to do that with someone who's volunteering, but it's very important that we verify the information that people are giving us. So, Katie, close this one.
Okay, it looks like 77% of those on the call said yes, they currently contact the references, and 23% said no.
Okay, well that's actually much higher than I was hoping for, so that is great. Katie, the third question, can prospective volunteers complete an online application? And this has to do with the ease of people getting the information and letting you know that they are interested in discussing the possibility of being a volunteer. Having that information either online through a web-based application, or at least having the information emailed to them would certainly ease their ability to get the information. So Katie, let's close that poll.
Okay, 42% said that yes, they can complete an online application, and 58% said no.
Okay, well, that might be something that people might want to put on a list of to-dos, or at least a list of things to consider. Certainly we, NORC, can guide you to online applications so that you can look and see kind of how that's put together. The next question, Katie. And this one has to do with whether or not you have a volunteer policy and procedure manual for your volunteers. And again, it's important that in addition to the training material, that volunteers be given a policy and procedure manual that explains to them what their job is, when they're supposed to, report things immediately, how they fill out their paperwork, how they do many aspects of their job. Katie, let's close that poll. We're not letting people fall asleep here at the beginning.
All right. 67% said they do have a volunteer policy and procedure manual, and 33% said no. Okay, well, that'll be another opportunity if you're keeping a list at home or at the office. The NORC website has examples of policy and procedure manuals for volunteers, so we'll make sure that people have access to and can find that information. And then the final polling question, Katie, is do you have volunteers that work in your office, either answering the phones or entering data, assisting staff at the office rather than actually going out and visiting with residents? So, Katie, let's close that poll. 20% said yes and 80% said no. Okay, well, that's maybe another area for you to consider, that if it's hard for staff to get out and visit homes themselves, or to go out and visit volunteers, or go to activities to help in recruiting, that maybe there's a possibility of bringing volunteers in that maybe would prefer not to be visiting in nursing homes, but who would go through the training, become certified, so that they could have access to the confidential information, but they could be doing the work in the office, whether it's like suggested here, answering phones or entering data. It might be putting together a newsletter. It might be doing other kind of social media. It might be taking the data and analyzing it. There's just a myriad of things that people might be able to do that would free up staff time, so that the staff could get out and do some direct advocacy or systemic work. So thank you, Amity and Katie, for helping with that. The objectives of today's webinar, we are going to be providing, I hope, information that's going to ensure that volunteers are fully vetted. One of the things that NORC is working on right now is a toolkit that will contain suggestions of information that needs to be given to potential volunteers, as well as information that needs to be collected. This would be the type of toolkit that a program would look through and say, yes, we've got this, or no, we don't have this, and then here's an example that they might be able to use. And then the whole idea of knowing who it is that you're getting into your program, and making sure that during the application time, that not only is the program ensuring that this is a person that you want to have be a part of the program, but it's also a time when the person can decide if this is in fact the type of volunteer work they want to do. And then we're going to be sharing some ideas and tips for recruiting, and that's actually where Lenè is going to be focusing on. So what are the consequences when you get somebody who doesn't fit? And if this is the time, I sent out in the email that I wanted you to be thinking about who's the wrong person to have in your program. And I want, at this time, if you've thought of who's the wrong person, type that into the chat or question box on your tool box on the right-hand side of your screen. It's important to know that just as in a nursing home that doesn't hire people that stay for a long time, there's a time and energy that goes into that training, and I'm sure that's very
exhausting, and you just feel like how come I can't keep people in the program. But if it's the wrong fit, then it was even more of a waste. There is a terrific loss of trust if residents and their families and other complainants don't feel connected and feel an amount of trust in that volunteer or staff person. And then, of course, there's always the potential damage to the reputation of the program. If people feel that the program doesn't follow up, that they don't stick to their word, they're going to let other people know. You know, one of the things that we all know is that if a person has a complaint, they tell 7 people. But if they have a good experience, they only tell 1 person. So we want to make sure that the people that we are bringing on to the program, as much as we can, we want to make sure that they are going to stick with the rules and not cause problems for the program. So, Amity, do we have some things typed in, some other definitions of who's not the right person besides not adhering to the rules of confidentiality or not listening to residents' wishes?
Just 1 second. I'm trying to open it up. Let's see here. The person that doesn't have the, quote, right stuff. Our program brought aboard a volunteer ombudsman that got connected early in the experience with a citizen advocacy group that does not have the best relationship with the ombudsman program and ombudsman guidelines. And so I'm sorry, the comments are coming in fast and heavy, so I just lost that one. So I think it's safe to say that it damaged the perspective of that ombudsman, potential ombudsman volunteer. Another example would be a former lobbyist or someone with a vendetta against nursing homes or a particular nursing home due to past experience. Someone who is applying to volunteer to gain some personal benefit versus doing it to help the residents. A salesperson for real estate or insurance. Conflict of interest, angry at the home for personal reasons, not the best listener. Acting like they're part of the facility staff or even residents, basically part of that community, making themselves at home there, for example, eating. A wrong person, wrong fit would be someone that's not empathetic or a person planning to become employed in a facility. Someone that's impatient, unreliable. Someone that acts like a surveyor and really struggles with the ombudsman role. Someone who struggles to communicate professionally with both residents, staff, and everybody else. Another example would be someone that is judgmental, and kind of on the flip side of that, someone that hesitates to act. So someone that lacks really the courage to be an advocate. I think that's a very great, all these are really great points.
They sure are. I'm going to cut you off there, but what we'll do is we will commit to gathering all of those when we put the information out on the website. Thank you all for doing that optional homework. I know that some of you may have stayed up late last night worrying about how quickly you could type that in. This is a quote from Linda Graff, who for those of you who might have been in the volunteer world for many years, was the head of Energize and just a great volunteer coordinator. She retired a couple of years ago, but she says it's not that we don't trust volunteers, it's that the work they do is so important that we absolutely must oversee that work closely. And a thought that I've had for many years is that volunteering increasingly refers to the pay scale, not the nature or importance of the work. So in fact, we have volunteers across this country that are doing the exact same work as staff people. And so it really is the fact that they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart, which is why we owe it to them to make sure that they have all the tools and that we are, in fact, matching people up with information and assistance. Probably late last year, I asked the volunteer managers on the NORC listserv to write in and put down what the good characteristics of a volunteer ombudsman was. And I heard, when Amity was reading your responses, I heard the opposite of many of these good characteristics, and so I kind of thought that would happen. So I didn't want to leave, sometimes it's not good when you give people like the wrong answer. You want to make sure you give them the right answer. And in fact, many of these are the characteristics that we are looking for when we're looking for a volunteer. And I think that the important thing here is that you can't tell many of these characteristics just from a piece of paper. So in fact, having that conversation with that potential volunteer is critical to ensuring that you are feeling comfortable that this person fits within the program, and ensures that the volunteer feels comfortable with you in ensuring that they will make a good fit. So having that interview or question and answer time, allowing volunteers to have mentors where they can discuss things with other volunteers, and then getting that mentor to kind of report back on their thoughts. That interaction is so important to what we're talking about today. So we know that volunteers in the Ombudsman program are taking on, and we're asking them to do incredibly skilled tasks. This isn't a job, babysitting an animal, letter writing, or stuffing envelopes, or selling tickets to an event. These people represent your program to the public. They are wearing your logo on their name badge. They are giving out business cards that have their name or your program's information. They are going in and out of people's rooms and visiting people that are really vulnerable. And they also have access to so much information when they visit in a nursing home, or they're talking to a family member. They're finding out about financial information. They're finding out about medical information. They're finding out about relationships between children and parents. So they are taking on these skills, and this is probably the #1 reason why we need to make sure that that the fit is good. So all of this leads up to vetting through. One way we do that is through the background checks, and we didn't ask that question of how many of you do a background check, but I'm hoping that most of you do. I think it's always a struggle to pay for that, and so there are many different options out there for doing background checks. Many of you are able to use a state government check that it works with or that does the background checks for employees of state government. Others of you are not in that position. This is just one example. A company called First Advantage. It used to be called LexisNexis. This is a company that N4A, which is the National Association of Area Agencies on Aging, they have partnered with First Advantage, and if you go to the website, N4A website, and look for First Advantage, you will find information about their background check services. and basically they are, you are just billed per how many ever you do. So there's no monthly fee or anything like that. It's if you do one, you pay for one. If you do 10, you pay for 10. The question that you'll have to be asking is whatever background check system you use, what kind of check is it doing? Is it just statewide? Is it nationwide? Those of you that have an area that's next to the next state, or close to another state, or if you're in a small state where there's a bunch of states surrounding you, you know, probably to be doing the best job possible, you probably need to be doing something more than just what's in your own home state. I mentioned earlier that NORC is putting together this toolkit, and these are the items that we're putting into the toolkit. This letter is just an explanation of what the program is, some basic requirements to become a representative, requirement list, an application form, an acknowledgement form, which includes confidentiality, conflict of interest, and codes of ethics, and then some suggested interview questions when you sit down and actually talk to someone, and additional resources that you will have. So this intake tool hopefully will be out on our website within the next 4 to 6 weeks, and as soon as we put it out there, we will make sure that you are made aware of it. In talking about the suggested requirement list, this would just be a page that would kind of outline information. This might be in your job description, or it might be a separate document, but these are the pieces of information that if someone wanted to volunteer, this would be the information that they would want to know. What are you requiring of me? So some of the items on this list right now are the time commitment, whether transportation is required, and then whatever processing, what's the time frame, or what's the outline of what's the next step in this process. Some of you do a health screening. Hopefully, well, we saw that most of you are doing interviews, and then annual requirements if there is continuing education that a person needs to be going through. And then I hope, and I didn't ask this question of whether or not there is an annual evaluation. This is something that we're going to be really recommending, that each year that volunteers have an opportunity to give feedback to the program. That will help you, just like we do at the end of this webinar, where we ask you, you know, how did we do? What more do you need? What suggestions or ideas do you have? This is the same type of thing with your volunteers, is to find out, were they, you know, satisfied with the amount of connection they felt with the program? What suggestions do they have for the future? And then I know that for many of you, the distance between the application process being done and the training, sometimes there's a delay, and sometimes it might be a month or 2 or 3 before you begin the training, and then you start losing people because they're like, well, you approved me, but now I can't get trained for X number of months. You might consider sending out information for them to be looking at, and we're just making some suggestions here of videos and of some curriculum. And let me see if I can actually do this. No, I can't. Well, these are all the different videos, and I don't see the one I want. That's not too good, is it? Oh.
The word ombudsman can be tricky to say sometimes. I had to look it up in the dictionary. Yeah, it took me a while to get used to Ombudsman. It is odd sounding. It means to me a friend for our residents.
Most of the time when I ask people if they know what an ombudsman is, their eyes kind of roll back a little bit and get glossy.
But once they do understand it and they understand what we're here for, we're here to help the residents.
Volunteer ombudsman.
Okay, well, I'm not going to show the whole thing, so you're going to have to go out to the NORC website, look under videos, and it's the first one there. This is the Texas video, but it's only 3 minutes, and so it would be a good thing for a volunteer to watch ahead of time and then maybe to have some kind of conversation. And then the online Ombudsman curriculum, module number 1, would be something that we would perhaps suggest that people do while they're kind of waiting to take the orientation classes. Some suggested interview questions: what attracted you? What can I tell you? And then maybe try to get into some questions that would really get you to understand what the person's point of view is. You know, what would you do if the administrator of a facility told you she does the best she can and there's nothing else that can be done about the problem that you've brought to her? And obviously, some of these interview questions, you're going to want to be thinking of the, you know, what's a good answer, and then what's maybe not a, you know, if someone says, oh, well, I would probably, you know, run away screaming, maybe that's not the right person to have. But also, probably don't want someone who would get into the administrator's face and say, well, that's not a very good response. So you want that middle ground. You want the person to be able to problem solve and to be able to try to find some middle ground on how you can help move the administrator to another position besides, I can't do anything. I've done everything I can. What do you expect of me? So having that kind of conversation at the very beginning will help you know where is this potential volunteer right now. And then, you know, do you think older people can make their own decisions even if those decisions are against a doctor's orders? Again, it's an opportunity to find out where this person is coming from. I mentioned the acknowledgement form will be part of the toolkit. We're looking at confidentiality issues. We're looking at conflict of interest. And we're looking at the code of ethics. All 3 of those are important policies that we need to make sure that the potential volunteer understands, and that they promise that they will keep confidentiality. They promise that they're not in a conflict of interest, and if they get in one, a potential one, that they'll come talk to you. And then the whole code of ethics saying that they agree to the high standards that the program puts on any representative of the office. So that's talking about the toolkit. I want to switch real quickly to the results of the volunteer management questionnaire that many of you completed. We had 38 of the 48 states that have a volunteer program respond, 24 state ombudsmen, 13 state staff, 91 local representatives. 93.5% said they require facility visits as part of their certification process. And that's up, which is very good. It's up a few percentages from what was told us in 2012, which was the last time this survey was sent out. 90% use mentoring or job shadowing during the volunteer training process. So if you're not using mentoring, you might want to consider learning how other programs do that and how they get reports back from the mentors. One of the good ideas that I heard in a conversation the other day with some local volunteer managers was having the job shadowing or mentoring be done by two different people, that the volunteer would go out with two different people so that they would understand that there's not just one way to walk up and down the hall and talk to people and help resolve their issues, that in fact there are multiple ways, and that person needs to just find out what way works best for them. When asked to prioritize the needs of the program, not surprising, the number one issue was the recruitment, following closely with how do I keep those people. And we asked people to share a management practice that worked well. And I'm just going to quickly run through some of these, that our mentor ombudsman spends as long as necessary until the person's ready to be out on their own. Oops, get away from there. Placing flyers at YMCA Cafe and nearby Starbucks, which Amity would find those because she's a Starbucks fan. I would not, because if it's not got a Diet Coke in the place, I'm not going to probably visit there. So, you know, who are you looking for? Where are you going to place the flyers if you have them? Program said they had a good vetting process. We offer continuing education. We weed out those folks who are not wanting to do this work for the right reasons. Some people use Teams. Some people do a meet and greet, post initial screening interview. So it's a kind of informal opportunity for people to talk with other volunteers already in the program. And then my favorite is I call my volunteers frequently and take them out for ice cream and spend one-on-one time with them. And boy, that would be a luxury that would be nice to have, wouldn't it? To be able to spend time with that one-on-one. We've gotten a lot more descriptive with our job descriptions and our expectations, and they still have people who want to do the job. The self-evaluation tool that's completed, and they can learn so much about that for figuring out goals for future work with the program. And what have I done? Okay, well, so let me leave that slide up. Lenè, I am going to turn this over to you now. So, Katie, if you'll do your magic.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. The construction that was going on outside seems to have paused. Uh-oh. It says I'm getting an application error, and it will cause the application to exit after a short delay. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and load the slides, and you can tell me if they appear on the screen.
Okay.
So it's loaded on my end.
Yes, you're good.
Yay! So I was invited to talk a little bit about volunteer recruitment, and I want to thank you for that opportunity, and I hope that I'm able to share something today or that will spark someone's imagination, because I think recruitment is a very broad topic. So I'm going to dive right in here.
Lenè, before you go, Amity, will you or Katie confirm that you can see her screen?
Oh, that would be good.
We were just chatting about that. We cannot see your slides. So,
okay, let me
Carol,
see if I can.
Yeah, let me, if you'll give me control, Lenè, and you'll just have to, we'll just have to tell me when to move it forward.
Okay, that's fine. So we can go to the next slide. I think we're at the beginning.
Right, recruitment.
Okay, is it showing recruitment? Okay, so the three areas, my screen is not moving, so I think I'll just have to figure out how this is going to work. Maybe if let me try one more thing. I need to get back to where you guys are. I think what happened is it closed me out of the webinar. So I'm going to wing it here. So the slide that we're on is recruitment, and I'm going to try to cover 3 areas, which is targeted and broad, education, outreach, marketing, and then response and communication. So next slide. And I'm just going to keep talking as if I can see the slide because all I see is the first slide. So things to consider and that I think are really important when you're looking at recruitment is that it needs to be targeted and it needs to be broad. So that target needs to be analyzed and developed. So identifying the area of need is really important before implementing any sort of a recruitment activity. To gain the best results, the planning is going to be important, and even identifying where to begin the plan and how to implement that plan. So these are the 4 categories that have been really helpful for me. And the first one, where the duck is it anyone? So who are we looking for? Where is that identified need within your agency or program? Do you need more male volunteers? Do you need more rural volunteers? Do you need more in a specific area? We recently targeted a specific area in Portland because we were really, really low for a large area where there was a number of facilities in need of an ombudsman. So really looking at, is it anyone, and is it from anywhere? That anyone could be too, just, you know, that saying of, are we just filling the bus, or are we filling selected seats? So the other thing to look at is what's the time frame? When do you need these volunteers? Ideally, you would want to start recruiting for a targeted area 3 or 4 months prior to the training being scheduled. So look at what those time frames are. And then, is there a budget? I think that a number of the ombudsman programs throughout the nation operate very differently. So being able to look at, do you have a budget at all? Is there money allocated for recruitment? And if not, then it really restricts what you may or may not be able to do, or you may have to really become creative. Recruitment efforts need to incorporate information that's going to bring the right applicants, and so looking for that best fit is also a component that you want to combine with this targeted and broad category. Okay, next slide. So it should be recruitment messaging clear and concise. I inserted this slide because I have found that oftentimes if messaging in our recruitment materials is not really clear, people will contact you assuming that it's for one thing when maybe it's another. But there's also, sometimes we can be misleading without intending to, and omit information that we think, oh, if we put that out there, they may not want to do this. But it's really important to put that information out there, because then the people responding are the ones that are really looking to accomplish those specific tasks. So I like this example, and basically I'm not going to read it to you, but it's someone who did respond to an ad, even went to an orientation, only to learn that it wasn't what he had anticipated. And they used in the last line that the volunteer felt like it was a bait and switch. And I don't know that we ever want volunteers or potential volunteers coming to expressing an interest only to find out that it's nothing but like what had been conveyed. So I think that's really important. Conveying the rules, the guidelines, things like conflict of interest up front really can help ensure a successful application process. So next slide. I really wish I could see the slide. This is kind of like doing it sort of in the dark. So this is a concentric diagram, and this is a tool that I've used in a number of different programs where we've implemented volunteer recruitment plans. And in our particular program, we have a volunteer support recruitment group. They're called Recruitment and Screening. I'm going to talk a little bit about them again later. And one of the things that we did late actually in 2016 was we all worked on these diagrams within our group. So in various counties throughout our state, our recruitment and screening volunteers sat down and we did this. So they identified areas where they really needed to draw volunteers or increase volunteer opportunities. And one of them decided it was going to be men. And so this diagram here really focuses on where they're going to find men. But the basic premise of this is that you look at who you are as an individual, and then you think of where your network is. So your initial network, where do you know people from? And so then you list that. So maybe it's your church, maybe you're very active there, and you know this person named Todd at your church, and you could contact Todd to see if you could do a presentation there, or if the Ombudsman program could provide a presentation. So some of the other areas, it might be that you would like Hispanic volunteers or Spanish-speaking volunteers. Maybe you want to really target folks that are retired. So it can really be used in a number of different ways. It's been really valuable, a really valuable tool, and it kind of helps each person on the recruitment team stay focused on where their next steps are. So the other thing I wanted to mention was one of the documents that was sent in this packet for this webinar was a quick tips document, and I really liked the program assessment and analysis section. It gave a lot of information, again, about processes for identifying where your particular program or agency needs to find volunteers. So the next slide. So now moving on to recruitment, what I call education, outreach, marketing. I believe all of those things work together to bring information to the overall community about, first, educating them on what is the mission of and purpose of the Ombudsman, long-term care Ombudsman program. Why does it exist? So that outreach, that can happen through outreach, and it can happen through marketing. And then the recruitment piece can also go hand in hand with that. Once they know what the mission and purpose is, then you have an opportunity to invite people to volunteer and to participate. So some of the ways that we currently are accomplishing those things, and again, this is throughout our entire state, is through volunteer fairs and community events. We're doing quite a bit of work online and social media. In fact, we get a large percentage of our volunteers through that way currently. Networking and partnerships is really important because it keeps the long-term care Ombudsman visible, the agency visible, and the work we do visible. Providing presentations and seminars, that goes a lot with the education piece, using media marketing and publicity, and then print material. And under each one of these is a whole plethora of other bulleted points that could be used to recruit volunteers. So next slide. This one really just identifies some ideas around fairs and events. What are those? So some of the areas where we are present and visible would be health fairs. We just set up a table. We have information to share about our mission and purpose, as well as the volunteer opportunity. We always have a sign-up sheet there that invites people to participate in our online once-a-month open house webinar, and I'll talk more about that again as well. These types of events tend to be more educational in nature. However, we have found many people have no idea what an ombudsman is and struggle even to pronounce it correctly. It's kind of funny. And once they've heard about that, they say, oh my goodness, that's something I should consider doing. So the task of recruitment and education, as I mentioned, really go hand in hand. And I think if more people were aware of the mission, then they share it with others who may need the service, or others who they may feel might be a good advocate. Our tracking shows that about 12% of our volunteers responded as a result of one of these types of events. We have volunteers who go to farmers markets, again, set up at tables for education, volunteer fairs. It says senior on here, so senior fairs, and sometimes that's health fairs, but we've had a number of seminars and forums in our community, actually throughout the state, that are focusing on fraud, against seniors and Medicare and some of those things. And when I contact them and say, hey, can we show up and set up an information table, they are more than happy to invite us to. So we have our recruitment and screening committee. Some of them are very active with craft fairs, and so they tend to do that. Let's see, next slide, please. So this is a little bit about online and social media. Website. You know, Carol, I don't know if we're going to be able to go to our website. So maybe that's a link we can provide later. I don't think it'll show up if I bring it on my screen.
I'm actually opening it up right now.
Okay.
We're looking at what we do and complaint help, volunteering for the Ombudsman program.
Okay, I'm going to try to do this from memory. Well, maybe I can pull it up on my own screen. Let's see. Hope it'll let me see my own screen today. So what you can see here is, honestly, I'm going to just put this disclaimer out there. It's not the best looking website. It is filled with lots of information. We are just about to launch our new website in a couple of weeks here, so talk about timing. But what I would like to point out is that on the far left side there, the second thing or the third thing that comes up is volunteer. And having a volunteer tab on your site and then a dedicated page to volunteering is really important. So someone that's really quick looking, they're going to go to where the menu is, right? And then on the far right, it also volunteering. We start to give information there so you can find training dates, and then it says, go to our volunteering page. So, and then right below that, it talks about our online open house. So that's really the main things I would like to point out with this, especially since I'm not able to see it really well. So the website is critical. We have a couple of links on here that I think are really good. And one of them is handled through SurveyMonkey, and it's a response site. Let's see if I can get it. Carol, if you can go to the volunteer page, and then it says towards the middle where you can download an application to be a recruitment and screening committee volunteer. These are some of the things that we're going to be changing. But then it also says down below in the sort of the table there, download an application, frequently asked questions, what's it like to be an ombudsman. So we have a number of other resources here for people to be able to click on. If you continue to scroll, it has training information. And then, let's see. I'm not going to be able to find it. That's terrible. As people navigate their way through here, contact our volunteer recruiter would lead them to my email. But one of the things they will find as they work their way through the website is a link where they can ask for more information. And on that link, we ask them questions about their name, their address, if they'd like to be on our newsletter list, if they're interested in volunteering, what month they might be, or what time frame they might be available to volunteer. And that immediately comes to us, and we're able to respond back with a packet. They can also download a packet from our site, which has been really helpful. I would say about 25% of the people that contact us through online recruitment will submit one of those full forms filled out where we can contact them, either call them or email them back. And it's proven to be really beneficial. So let's see. Can you go to the next slide, Carol?
I can.
So it actually says website. And on that website, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but the job description, having a frequently asked questions is really, really important. Ours is kind of lengthy. I have found that handing this to people even before the interview starts, when we meet one-on-one and saying, would you like to review this along with the job description, I give them about 5 minutes to do that, really helps with the interview process, and it helps them ask really good questions about what they might be signing on for. The other thing we have on our website, which is helpful, are a couple of videos. And the training information is really important because people may be getting ready to retire, or they may be making a life change, a move, or something, and they're going to want to know when they can participate in training. So what does the training encompass? When is it going to be? Where will it be held? In our state, people want to know if they have to travel far to go to training. And then how do they find out more about becoming a volunteer? So those what, where, when, why, how questions are always good to step back and ask yourself when you're reviewing your website. I think sometimes we all have the information, and so we just assume others can find it. And so if you really look at it through the lens of asking yourself those questions, you'll be able to see where maybe you have missing links. Or you might find that you've done it really well, and that's always nice to know as well. So being able to download the application or even fill it out online is also a benefit. It makes things easy. And who do they contact if they want more information? And then I talked a little bit about our open house. So the online open house is actually done through webinar, and people sign up for it on our website, and then they are contacted to remind them of when the date and time is going to be, and we conduct those one day a month at the same time every month, and that allows us to promote it everywhere. We can promote it on flyers, we can put it at the bottom of our email, we can send out invitations. It's just a really consistent way, and typically we have anywhere from 2 to as many as 15 people that will sign up during the month. So let's see, I think we can go to the next slide.
Lenè, is that information about why to become a volunteer or that's discussed in that webinar?
Oh, on the webinar? So yes. We really talk about the mission, we talk about the purpose, we talk about what the Ombudsman volunteers actually do, the need, and we cover kind of who our staff are. It's sort of that is if someone were coming to an open house at your business or at your office, we try to present it in that way. So we have pictures of our staff on there. We have examples of volunteers who have either won awards, pictures of the training class, and really just do a comprehensive overview of really as if someone had come here and said, show me and tell me all about your office and what you do.
Okay, so, thank you.
You're welcome. So the next slide should say Facebook. And Facebook is really the only social media source we're using currently. And we've evaluated this a little bit and internally are still considering maybe Twitter and some of the others. The thing is controlling content is a little bit of a question and a mystery to us. So I would say if there's any out there that have good input about that, we might all be able to learn from it, whether it's been successful for you and or whether you've had concerns. But what I've found with Facebook, particularly at the Ombudsman program, is that the responses, whether it's the likes or the shares, are much more likely to happen when we're featuring our real volunteers. So I put a couple pictures on this slide so you can see what that might look like. So we have on the right-hand side there a picture of one of our volunteer recruitment and screening committee members. And this is just a little example of what a table setup would look like. And then on the left, we actually have a volunteer who was attending an event, and we just asked them to write something on a whiteboard, and that's what she came up with. She's also an award-winning volunteer. She's been recognized a number of times for her incredible advocacy and heart for the aging. So I guess my thoughts were really around keep it real, because people like real people, and they want to see real people doing the work. I often hear when I talk to people about volunteers, they say, well, who are your volunteers? What do they like? Do you think I'm a good fit? So I think that's why you want to kind of see yourself in other volunteers. So keep it informative, try to keep it interesting, mix it up. Encourage those shares within your own volunteer group, within staff, within your community partners, and invite people. Always those invitations to, oh, have you checked out our Facebook page? And promote it as much as you can. So I like to say that when I first started focusing more on the Facebook, we were getting about 60 likes or one share every so often. And once we started featuring our real volunteers and real things that were happening, it allowed the volunteer, it allowed to us now, so we have over 300, somewhere between 300 and 400 hits on an actual volunteer's post. If I post a link to, like for an educational or informational site, we might get 50 to 75, sometimes 100 hits. So for me, the Facebook stuff is kind of fun, but I think keeping it real is really important. Next slide, please. So this was where I just wanted to give some ideas around involvement with other agencies, whether that's clubs, businesses, the local community network, just keeping the message visible and present. Again, this kind of is that education piece of people can't find you to volunteer if they don't know what you do and if they don't know the program exists. So word of mouth is still the most important, even in this technology age and our online communication world. When we did some data collection back at the first of the year, let's see, I'm looking at my numbers here, we still were 30% of our volunteers found us either through another volunteer, through a friend, through an existing staff member, or a previous ombudsman. So being out there is really important because people may have heard about it once, but then they see it again and they go, oh my goodness, I really wanted to do that at some point in my life. So these opportunities provide those personal touches and the potential for relationship building that is so critical to promoting and sharing the mission. Plus, aligning the long-term care ombudsman work with others that are working to ensure the rights, safety, well-being, and care of the aging is really important. So this, again, this is just sort of those lists of the quick ones that I came up with. One mention that I will have, if you're not using your local libraries to help with recruitment, I would strongly recommend that you do that. Some of ours incorporate bookmarks into the books that people check out, and we've also done that with bookstores. So that was another way to just sort of be visible. Okay, next slide. I don't want to take too much time here. I know that I'm sort of on a 20-minute plan.
You are fine.
I'm fine? Yes. Okay. So the next one is about media marketing and publicity. And our data shows that 27% of our volunteers in the past year, referrals, so inquiries, have come from articles that are written in the newspaper, press releases, radio. There still is an indication that this is not the first time that they'd heard of the Ombudsman volunteer role. So we, on our application, we ask how they came to hear about the Ombudsman program. And we used to say, you know, check one, and then we opened it up and said, check all that apply. And it's really interesting to see the many ways that they actually heard about the Ombudsman program before they responded and applied. So there's something that's called the rule of 7, which I believe more research is telling us that it's more than 7 times. But it's that 7 times. People have to hear about something 7 times before it sticks and or they respond to it. I've heard in marketing seminars, actually, that it's up to 16 times. So whether they see it at a fair, they get a library book with a bookmark in there, or they read something in the newspaper, or they heard a blip on the radio. Whatever it is, those things compound over time, and then eventually it's the right time and they respond. So that broad, when I said, you know, recruitment needs to be targeted and it needs to be broad, that's why. It's really important that there's multiple touch points out there, that people are seeing and hearing the message and the need in a number of different ways over time. I will say that many of our sort of instant responses come from newspaper or publications. So we have used periodicals. We have used newsletters such as city newsletters. They often will put a blurb in there about the Ombudsman, the need for Ombudsman volunteers. We've used other people's newsletters. Retired senior volunteer programs, they will put something in their newsletter. There's also publications that people pick up at the grocery store that are free. And I have found that if I just contact those folks and say, here's what we do, here's what the need is, will you publish something at a very low cost or at no cost? And I'm going to say 70% of the time they will do it at no cost. And then we get responses where someone says, oh, I just saw this in the Boomer and Senior that you need volunteers. Do you need them in my area? So I know some programs have the budget to be able to use television. I have been trying to work with television stations in Oregon to see if we can find something with matching funds, because we have to be really creative. We don't have a marketing budget per se. And we've used radio, and in rural areas, radio is really important and seems to be a really good tool. Videos, I think whenever you can use a video, it's important. Whether you're doing a public presentation or doing your online open house on your website, videos just show people doing the work, and it's really good. By the way, I love that Texas video that Carol showed us earlier, a glimpse of. If you have not seen it, I would encourage you to do that. You can also find it on YouTube where it's generic and it doesn't mention the Texas program, so we're using that one a lot. It says public awareness on here. So one of the things that has been done in the past, there's a little grocery bag icon there, was local grocery stores sometimes will allow their bags to be printed with a message on there, particularly if it's a community service message. And so that would fall under public awareness and kind of those giveaway items. And anytime you can find a giveaway item that you can logo and put your mission or message on that doesn't cost anything or cost very little, I would encourage you to try it. especially with grocery bags that are reusable, because they use it over and over, and other people see the message as well. So next slide. This is print material, and we are working internally on all of our print material. We recently had our logo redesigned, and what we are really striving for is the same look with a consistent message, something that's colorful, that's professionally done, that's attractive and appealing, because there's lots of competition out there. I am also a fan of coffee shops. So when I was first hired at the Ombudsman program, I went to several coffee shops and I took pictures of their bulletin boards where they allow you to place posters or flyers. And I put one of ours up next to it, and I brought it back to our office and I said, do you think that ours sort of just fades away with all of these colorful, fun looking? And it did. And so we realized then that we had some work to do on our print material. So some of the places that we post those pieces of material, or we try to get those out and visible, would be coffee shops, libraries, local businesses. Sometimes will let you put something right by the front door in the window, particularly if you're recruiting in that particular area and you have someone that can take the time to talk to them about it and what the need is. Grocery stores, health clubs. Our recruitment and screening folks have taken brochures and flyers that were handed out after the end of a yoga class, or you know, after the end of, or even hung up at the health club. So I thought that was pretty creative. So the utilization of posters, flyers, brochures, I mentioned bookmarks, postcards where you mail something out. Postcards are nice because you can have a message on one side and a message on the other side. So your recruitment message could be on the colorful side, where the message that you're sending to the person is more focused towards them. There's always letters. We have done church letters that have gone out to churches asking them to either put up a flyer in their church or to make an announcement, and we've actually been successful with that. And business cards, just as long as everything has that same look, that same feel, so when someone looks at it, they go, oh, I bet that's the Ombudsman office. That's really what you strive for. I want to go back for a second to the flyers piece. When I was first looking at some of the flyers that at other places, I noticed some of them had tear tags. And I chatted with folks, and they're like, oh, those tear tag ones probably won't work. But you know what? We've tried them. And in the last year, we've had 3 volunteers that said, you know what? I saw it, and I took one of those tear tags. One lady said, I took one of those tear tags a year ago, and I've kept it in my desk. And now I'm retired, and I saw it in my desk and went, oh, yeah, I wanted to do this. So you never know when it's the right time for someone and what they're going to remember. And that's why the importance of those touch points of just continuing to broaden that message and that information is going to be so valuable. So let's see, I think we can go to the next slide. And I really wish I could see this one because I don't know that my notes worked. I'm going to pause for half a second here and see if I can pull up mine in my own office.
And while you're doing that, I'll just remind people, if you have questions or comments, please type them into the chat or question box in your tool box.
Thank you, Carol. So the slide we're looking at now says recruitment, communication, and response. And I think some of this may be reiterating some of the things that Carol touched on in her presentation, and the importance of the application and easy access to the application. So you should be able to find the application online. Even if you can't fill it out online, you should be able to print it. Folks should be able to contact your office and have it sent to them via email or mail, or even fax to them. So really be supportive in providing that application whatever way it can be provided. And then the frequently asked questions sheet. I think that one is critical. It gives the opportunity to talk about the conflict of interest, in depth about the mission, the time that volunteers are required to spend, the different scenarios. It just can incorporate anything that you feel is really important for people to know prior to them submitting that application. Job description is incredible. Oh, I noticed I have a typo. I hope it's not on your copy. The interview process is also really important. We have, as I mentioned, recruitment and screening people who go out and also help me with conducting those interviews, and it's so incredibly helpful. But we also have forms that are consistent, so consistent questions. and consistent information that we provide. And then we do check all the references, and we do run a criminal records check. So and then informing the applicant of what that interview process is going to look like, and what is all-encompassing in processing their application. And then the communication preference. Do they want to be communicated with primarily by phone, by email, written? I still find that some people don't really have email, and if they do, they don't want to use it, so they prefer things come to them in the mail. And then you have to allow time for that. So sometimes for them, I also make phone calls. And then having an internal tracking system. Are you tracking the people that inquire? I keep our inquiries for up to just about 6 or 8 months, and I go back and I try to touch base with the folks that inquired maybe 6 months ago when I know we have a training coming up in their area. And that also has proven to be successful. People will say, oh my goodness, when I inquired, I really wanted to do this, and then my husband had surgery and I kind of forgot about it, but no, this is a good time for me to do it. And then providing that training information, again, back to the who, when, where, when is training going to be, how is it conducted. All of those pieces are really important for that communication, and it allows people to consider all of the pieces, and it also allows them to proceed in a way that is going to be more successful for them. And when it's successful for them, ideally it should be successful for the organization as well, which translates into it being successful for the residents that we're advocating for. Let's see, another component that I try to remember and really practice this, but it's important to thank people even when they inquire, and definitely when they submit an application. So a simple gesture of thanks is sufficient in letting them know that they're desired and their help is valuable. When they're contacted, are they contacted with enthusiasm? And it's important to thank them all along the way, I think, because letting them know that their desire to help is valued, it's just one of those things that sits well with people. That we recognize that they're giving of their time, and that they're committed to ensuring resident rights and dignity, and conveying that message is just really important. The other thing is response time. So when someone submits an application, what is your sort of internal practice? I try to respond to people literally within 24 hours, if not sooner. So oftentimes, as soon as I get it, I will call them, email them, or whatever their preferred way of communication was. And then again, explaining the process. What does that mean? Let's see. So the next slide. And this one I threw in here just because I think it helps me sometimes, and I have had this for actually quite a while, and I review it. But asking people to volunteer is actually just that, just ask them. People generally like being asked to volunteer, even if they have to say no. Once you've had an opportunity to announce why and when your organization will be needing help, and then invite them personally. And I think that's why 27% of our volunteers arrived at our program, because they were invited by an existing volunteer or by a staff member, because they liked that, they were asked. And then team, work with the either employees or a board or the volunteers, any individuals that you work with, and ask them to volunteer. So just in going after the recruitment piece as a team, it sort of takes the burden off of one person, and it also spreads it out wider, kind of like that concentric diagram. It allows people to contact their own networks. And then lifetime volunteers, creating a relationship with new and old volunteers that will make them want to come back. We have 2 training classes starting in the month of June, and there's a total, I think, of 18 people. And 3 of the 18 were certified Ombudsman volunteers with our program 10 and 12 years ago. So they've returned because it was a really positive experience. So creating lifetime volunteers is one way to ensure that they will continue to help recruit for your organization, and it also makes it easy for them to come back when circumstances in their life have changed. That's also a value. So always managing them with respect and providing the feedback that empowers them to to have a rewarding experience is something that I think pays back over time. Another thing with recruitment, it's no is not never. No doesn't mean that I'm never going to do this. It just means no, maybe this isn't the right time, or no, this isn't currently my area of interest. So, when we start recruiting volunteers as early as possible up front from a training time or whatever, then you have time for them to say no and think about it, and we can say, you know what, we're going to have another training in 3 months. Do you mind if I contact you again? People will often say yes. So just because their schedule may not appear to allow them to now, again, no doesn't mean never. So the next one says leave seats empty, and Carol hit on this, I hit on it once, and talking about it again, but sometimes it's better to leave a volunteer spot empty than fill it with a person who's just there to fill the spot. We need to be able to rely on them fulfilling our mission, which means seeing residents consistently, being a good ambassador of the program, and meeting the requirements. So sometimes it's just better to leave that seat empty until you find that the right person who is the right fit for the work they're being asked to do. Be people that are people-driven. Recruit individuals who want to be part of a team and not just a seat. So the ones that are enthusiastic and have been part of teams in their previous work environment or are used to interacting with lots of folks, those tend to be really good people for this type of work. And then it says position title. And one of the things that I've learned is people, even in their volunteer work, they want to feel valued and they want to feel that it's important. And so the title with our program is Certified Ombudsman Volunteer, and that lends itself to importance. And I think if we provide as much detail so that the volunteers know what they're signing up for, they are going to appreciate being recognized with the role, and many of them bring substantial career experience through their work. So acknowledging that brings value to what they're doing. And I hope I'm making sense here without being too wordy. But I have found, for instance, I had a volunteer applicant recently who said, I really reviewed your material. I went to your website and I think I read everything there, and then I read the entire packet you sent me, and then I went online and I did some research because I really wanted to know that I wasn't just going to stand and pack boxes of food. I really wanted to know that this was something I could sink my experience, my skills, my education, and my time into, and I feel like I'm a really good fit. And so that's that value, that we really value them and that we value what they bring to the position. So that is it for my slides. And I would encourage you, lastly, that if you are able to track where your volunteers are coming from, it allows you to really target areas that have been successful within the other targeted areas that you define. So if you know you need people in a specific demographic area or whatever your definition is, look at what's worked for you and then implement that. But also give consideration to where you're trying to recruit. So we do things differently here if we're looking at rural parts of Oregon for recruitment versus the Portland metro area. So just being aware, look at the culture of the communities and your targeted areas and brainstorm. And please utilize your volunteers. They always have really good ideas and information. So thank you, everybody.
Lenè, thank you so much. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amity to read off maybe a couple of the questions.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Lenè. Excellent points, especially identifying the culture of the community and then targeting your recruitment efforts. I live here in Oregon and work from my home office, and I've seen your recruitment posters in the rec centers and libraries and all over the place. So before we get to questions, wanted to follow up on the comment about the Texas video being on YouTube. Another place you can find it on our website that links directly to that YouTube video is click on the About Ombudsman tab of the page, and you can actually direct potential volunteers there to watch the video directly from our website, or you can link to the YouTube video and then use it in your promotional materials. So thank you. Okay, questions. Can the speakers give me an idea of how they found using references helpful to weeding out a potential volunteer? I don't do references because I don't expect the person they refer me to will say anything negative about them. So why are they a good use of time in your opinion?
I have an example I could share. This is Lenè.
Yes.
So I was talking to a reference who said, I think she would be wonderful for this because her husband just passed away about 6 weeks ago in a facility and she was very unhappy with the facility. She hadn't disclosed that in the interview or in any of the information, and it allowed me to be able to have a conversation with the applicant about the time frame in which she wanted to volunteer. The training was coming up within a couple of weeks, and after a conversation about grief and her feelings about the facility where her husband was, she determined that she wanted to wait a year. And we're coming up on that 1 year, and I've recently had contact with her, and she said she was in a much better place now to be objective. And she said, actually, I want to thank you because you were correct with me needing time to grieve. So I think that's just one that's front of mind because I had recently had a conversation with her again.
And this is Carol, and I think it's true that obviously people are not going to put down the name of someone who is going to necessarily say negative things, but when you call and explain what the job is and ask the question, you know, she's put you on as a, or he has put you on as a reference, you know, knowing that this is the types of things, the skills that we're looking for, you know, how enthusiastically would you say they would fit? And so you're giving the person an opportunity to maybe say, well, I think they'd be okay, or wow, they'd be great at that. So you could read in a little bit to what they're saying. And I also think it's important to say that anything that is said to you will not be repeated to the applicant, that this is just a conversation. It's just one piece of a larger gathering of information. So great question. Amity?
Can I add one more thing quickly?
Yes, of course.
So I have also found that in checking references, when I explain what they have applied to volunteer to do, many people say, oh my goodness, I didn't know about that. This would be interesting for me. So I've actually been able to mail out packets for them to potentially volunteer. So there's that opportunity as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. That actually happened to me too when I was a local. So great point. Thank you. Let's see. Lenè, a question for you. They were wanting to know if you work as a full-time volunteer trainer and recruitment specialist. I assume that's yes.
That is a yes.
Okay, great. Also, I think for you, you mentioned a self-evaluation tool, and they were wanting to know where they could get an example of that.
Gosh, is that something I mentioned or something? Oh, I see. For your agency for recruitment purposes.
Yes.
I was looking at the materials that were provided. I'm trying to find it in my notes now. I apologize.
It was not the it was the other one. Hang on here. I'm bringing it up.
There's a quick tips document, and it says it has a program assessment and analysis tool on there, and it gives really good instruction on how to follow up with that.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, that is our document. I know what you're talking about now. Thank you. It was the self-assessment and some quick tips. Thanks. Glad you found it.
You're welcome.
Actually, I think I was the one who mentioned the self-assessment. It was from one of the responses to the survey that we did, and we'll go back and see if we can't find out where that, idea came from, and if we can, we will get it and make sure people know we have it.
Thanks. Yeah, they were just asking for the link. And that, so to answer your question, it is provided as one of the handouts, and we'll make sure to include it as an additional resource under this webinar when it's posted. This was created a few years ago by me, actually, so thanks. Let's see. Any suggestions on branding the state program but making it really feel local to this jurisdiction or geographical area where a volunteer will serve? So kind of going back to knowing the culture of a region or local program. Any tips for that?
Can you read that again? Was it on branding? Or?
Yes. So kind of how do you brand a state, something that's a statewide program, obviously, but still tailor it and to your local programs if you have them in your state, and make it specific to the culture where you're trying to recruit?
So one of the things that I've done is I still use pretty much the same pictures, or I can change out the pictures, same language, and because you want consistency there. So it's where we conduct outreach. So in our rural communities, radio has been better. Local community publications that are available for people to pick up, like I mentioned, free at a grocery store, they're very likely to read those because not everybody subscribes to the newspaper anymore. And again, it's looking at what's valued in that community, and the personal appeals in a rural community go a lot farther. So I do travel more, I would say, to the rural areas than I do to our metropolitan areas, because the face-to-face with the director of the Chamber of Commerce or any of the local service clubs, that face-to-face in a rural community really means a lot to them. So being able to hand them your information and make that direct appeal, I find goes a lot farther.
Great point. Thank you. Another question for you. You mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation, Lenè, about recruitment that is broad as well as targeted. So a question came in about how can recruitment be both broad and targeted. So this question may have been answered as you went further into your presentation, but I wanted to offer it up if you had anything else to add. Okay, so the targeted piece is really identifying what type of volunteer do you need. So I'm going to use the men example because we still are predominantly female with our volunteer base. And so when we were looking for identifying, recruiting more male volunteers, then we went broad within that. So broad meant being present at car shows, because a lot of men go to car shows, being putting up flyers at more of the like golf clubs and the fitness clubs. So, and also with some of the other clubs that men belong to. So Rotary are still, in a lot of areas, predominantly men. So we really targeted that more broadly. And so that's it. It's that find the target and then go broad with the messaging. So utilize a number of different outsources, such as posters and flyers in the right place, speaking at the local club, attending a car show instead of a health fair. Do you see what I mean? So hopefully that helps a little. Thank you. So I just sent the link to the self-assessment tool that Lenè mentioned from the NORC website, but then we had a follow-up question about the self-evaluation tool, saying she was thinking of one that might be done by the volunteer for an annual review. So Lenè, I don't know if you said you had an example, but if you don't, we do have examples on our website of annual evaluations completed by volunteers about their experience in volunteering with the program.
Yes, I did see the one on your site, and actually thought it was quite good. And we did something here similar at the end of last year, and we did it through SurveyMonkey. We just created one.
Thank you. We'd always welcome if you have those questions that you used for SurveyMonkey, Lenè, we'd be happy to share those. So if you could go first.
Right, okay, I'll make a note.
Thank you.
Great. So let's just wrap up here with a couple of sources for resources on the NORC website. If you look at the Ombudsman support and then volunteer, there are all kinds of examples of information, policies, procedures, job descriptions that people have sent in. And as you look through this, if you would like to send something that your program has developed, I won't guarantee that we'll put everybody's stuff on, but if you've got something that's a little bit different than what is showing on our website, please feel free to send that to us. So this is all information that really kind of walks you through the whole process of having a volunteer program. Just real quickly, this is a public service announcement that I just forgot what the state was.
Thousands of New Yorkers live in nursing homes and other long-term care facilities. They're our family members, friends, and neighbors. Ombudsman educate, empower, and advocate for the quality of life and care of residents in these facilities. They investigate complaints, resolve issues, and facilitate improvements. If you're interested in volunteering, or if you need assistance, please contact the New York State Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program at 855-582-6769.
So that's just an example of a 30-second, that if I hadn't have messed it up before we got to it, but that's an example of a 30-second video that the New York State Ombudsman Program did.
Okay, thank you.
Wow.
I'd like to, momentarily, I'm going to invite up our Department of Health partner that we've been working very closely with, the NOAA.
Geez, sorry. So that's just one of the videos that's available on our website. And then if you are not a part of the listserv, please contact me, Carol Scott at theconsumervoice.org, and we will get you added. It's an opportunity for people to share good practices, to ask questions. There's about 105 people across the country that are a part of this listserv. And N4A has, they have the Aging Network Volunteer Resource Center, so they are working with all area agencies across the country in growing the capacity of volunteers. So they have information about recruitment campaigns, and all kinds of resources that are not specific to Ombudsman, but tend to be specific to reaching out to people who might be interested in helping older adults. And then just a final comment that October is Resident Rights Month, and I hope you all are receiving information about that. This talks about the challenge, the voice challenge, where we want residents to submit essays or poems or videos. The monthly activity calendar is a calendar that has an activity that could be done every day during the month of October. So making sure that nursing homes are aware of this. So if you have a way of reaching out or having your volunteers or staff take this information out and show them what they could be preparing for to do an activity every month. And then a form that could be used to record personal preferences by a resident and make sure that their caregivers are aware of it. And then we also have It's All About Me buttons, which anyone can purchase and give out to people. So, Amity, I'll let you wrap us up.
Sure. Thanks, Carol, and thanks for talking about Resident Rights Month. Just as another plug, Resident Rights Month is a fun way to get volunteers involved and something other than complaint resolution. So make sure to share that information with them and get them to encourage residents to participate in the Residents' Voice Challenge. So in closing, I'd like to definitely thank Lenè and Carol for their excellent presentations, and thank you for joining us today with your great personal experiences and questions and examples. Thank you so much. The webinar recording and all materials will be posted on our website soon. For additional resources, visit those links that Carol provided. If you're looking for something specific and have a hard time finding it, just let us know. And if you have anything to share with us, please send it our way. Also, just as a reminder, once the webinar is closed, you'll be directed to a very quick 5-question evaluation, and we really invite and appreciate your evaluation of today's webinar, so please complete that. So that's all we have for today. Thanks again for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye.